The classroom hummed with tension. Rows of students sat at their desks, a diverse mixture of alien species from across the Galactic Confederation. Some were tall and spindly, others squat and broad, but all shared one thing in common: confusion. The holoboard at the front of the room displayed the subject of today's lesson, glowing in bright letters. Domesticated Terran creatures. "What is this nonsense?" muttered Kalvek, a hulking Braxton whose scaled, reptilian skin gleamed under the overhead lights. His voice rumbled like a landslide, deep and unimpressed. "I didn't sign up for this course to learn about prey animals." Several other students murmured in agreement. Kalvek, who was built like a tank and known for his combat prowess, typically represented the more outspoken members of the class. But today even the quieter species seemed disoriented. The students were used to being taught about humanity's unusual strengths: their cunning in warfare, their endurance in harsh environments, their unexpected adaptability. But today's lesson had taken them all by surprise. Silra, a tall, silver-skinned being with a crown of glowing tendrils that drifted like underwater fronds, lifted her slender arm. "Professor Lane, is this a mistake? We are studying Terran creatures today, yes? I assume this is an advanced predator of some kind." "Not exactly," replied Professor Lane, his ever-cheerful tone doing little to alleviate the tension in the room. He was the only human present, standing at the front of the class, his brown hair messy as usual, his uniform slightly wrinkled, and a grin plastered on his face. "Today we're talking about pets." The confused silence that followed was nearly palpable. "What is pets?" asked Niska, a crystalline being whose body shimmered as plates of transparent material shifted across its torso. Its voice sounded like glass scraping against glass. "It is not a word my lexicon contains." "A pet," Lane explained, "is a domesticated animal that humans keep for companionship. They're not for hunting, not for work, not even for protection in most cases. They're kept because we enjoy having them around." This sparked a new round of murmurs. A gaseous entity, who floated within a containment field like a glowing cloud, flickered and pulsed. Its form shifted into something resembling a puzzled face, the holographic translation system kicking in to render its thoughts. "You mean you intentionally share your living space with animals? Without any strategic or survival benefit?" Lane's grin broadened. He leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms as if relishing the confusion. "Exactly. In fact, pets have been part of human culture for thousands of years. We form emotional bonds with them. They're like family." Kalvik snorted, the sound like gravel scraping against metal. "You're telling me humans, one of the most tactically driven species in the galaxy, keep useless creatures around? For emotional bonds? How has your species survived?" "Humans are illogical creatures," Resk, a gray-skinned Corlin, added from his seat. His bulbous eyes narrowed in suspicion, his crown of sensory tendrils twitching. "Even in galactic conflicts, we've seen them defy expectations. But this is beyond sense." "Is it?" Lane's smile faltered, but his tone remained calm. "Consider it from another angle. Pets are a reflection of our capacity for empathy, care, and cooperation. They teach us responsibility, and through that bond, we become better at forming connections with others. Maybe they seem insignificant to you, but I guarantee there's more to it than meets the eye." The students remained skeptical, their confusion now tinged with mild frustration. For most of them, animals were either food, tools, or dangerous obstacles in the natural environment. The idea of keeping a smaller, weaker creature simply for enjoyment went against almost every instinct they had. Kalvek, unable to let the issue rest, clenched his fists in agitation. "On Braxis, creatures this small wouldn't survive a day. They're prey. How can something so weak contribute anything of value? It's a waste of time." "Not everything in life is about survival," Lane replied, standing up straighter, his eyes meeting Kalvek's. "Sometimes it's about connection, about learning to care for something simply because you can. It's not about utility, it's about the relationship. That's what I'm here to show you today." Resk's tendrils twitched, and he leaned forward. "You claim humans invest in these pets for no practical gain. Do they possess any capabilities at all? Can they fight? Can they defend?" Lane chuckled. "Not in the way you're thinking. Sure, some animals like dogs have been trained to assist in protection or search and rescue, but most pets don't have a role like that. They're not soldiers or tools, they're companions. Their value comes from the bond we form with them." The room fell silent again as the students absorbed this information. For beings who came from warlike, survival-driven species, this idea seemed almost nonsensical. Silra's tendrils drifted gently as she pondered the words. If there is no clear benefit, how do you justify the energy spent caring for them? Surely your time could be better used elsewhere. Lane's expression softened, and he walked around the front of the desk, stepping closer to the students as he spoke. You're right in a way. It does take time and energy, but we humans believe that some things are worth that investment, even if they don't give us a material advantage. It's about more than survival. It's about what makes life worth living. Niska clicked its crystalline plates in frustration. Your species is known for logic and strategy. This seems counterproductive. Lane rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You might see it that way, but it's not all about strategy. Empathy can be a strategy in its own right. We've learned to work with other species, to cooperate rather than dominate. Pets teach us those kinds of lessons from an early age. It's not just about them, it's about how we grow as people. Kalvek was growing visibly irritated. His species, the Braxons, had little tolerance for what they saw as softness or waste. Their culture prized strength, endurance, and utility above all else. The very idea that humans, such a formidable and cunning race, would waste time caring for something so insignificant was grating at him. So Kalvik said, his voice low and simmering with tension, "You're telling me you willingly dedicate your energy to nurturing a creature that offers no protection, no strategic advantage, no nourishment. And in return you get, what? Affection." Lane's gaze met Kalvek's and he nodded. Affection, yes, and loyalty. And comfort. It's not something you can measure the way you measure resources or battle strength, but that doesn't mean it's not valuable. Silra tilted her head, her glowing tendrils flickering as she tried to make sense of this. Do these creatures possess some level of intelligence? Can they understand us? To a degree, Lane replied. Different animals have different levels of intelligence, but it's more about intuition. Pets learn to recognize they're humans, to respond to our emotions. They can sense when we're happy, sad, stressed. It's a kind of connection that doesn't need words. At the back of the room, an ecosi and undulating, gelatinous species whose form shifted constantly pulsed with a burst of color. The holo-translation flickered above its containment field, displaying its thoughts. Terrans often confuse sentiment with logic. You claim this bond improves your species, yet it appears inefficient. Sentiment doesn't always mean inefficiency, Lane responded, his voice gentle but firm. In fact, sentiment can be a strength. It helps us relate to others, and that ability to relate to understand the needs of others, to empathize, has helped humanity form alliances, create diplomatic bridges, and even avoid conflicts. Pets may seem small and insignificant, but they're part of what makes us who we are. Kalvik let out a slow growl, though it was less aggressive now, more contemplative. You are strange humans, always valuing things that seem to have no practical use. Lane smiled. Maybe. But that strangeness has kept us alive through a lot of tough times. Niska, ever the skeptic, clicked again. Perhaps we are merely struggling to comprehend this. Illogical affection. My kind has no concept of personal attachment. Bonds are transactional. Exactly, Lane said, walking back toward the desk. That's part of why this lesson is so important. Pets teach us about attachment without expectation. They help us practice empathy, kindness, and patience. And in return, they offer us a unique kind of companionship. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, he added, "And now I think it's time you met some." The students, already teetering on the edge of disbelief, tensed visibly at this statement. Kalvik's voice rumbled low, his skepticism still simmering. You brought one of these creatures with you. Lane grinned. Oh, I brought more than one. Let me introduce you to a few of my favorite Terran companions. He walked over to a side door that none of the students had paid much attention to, and with a few taps on his wrist console, the door slid open. Inside, several enclosures were lined up, each housing a different creature. The students' eyes, be they compound, multifaceted, or singular, widened in a mix of fascination and apprehension. Lane stepped aside, letting the door fully open. I think it's time you all got to see what a real pet is like. The room fell into a tense silence as the first animal emerged, padding forward on soft, silent feet. It was a sleek, black-furred creature, with long pointed ears and bright amber eyes. Its tail twitched lazily behind it, and its steps were as graceful as a hunter's. Kalvik narrowed his eyes. That is a predator. Lane nodded, a broad smile still on his face. This is Midnight. She's a cat, one of the most popular pets on Earth. Sharp instincts, good reflexes, but more of a companion than a hunter these days. Kalvik's mouth opened slightly, his confusion only deepening as the cat approached him, inspecting the hulking Braxton without fear. Midnight sniffed at his scaled leg, then looked up at him with those piercing amber eyes. She doesn't seem afraid, Silra observed, her tendrils flicking in an intrigued rhythm. She's not, Lane said. Cats are independent, confident. They don't need constant attention like some other pets, but when they choose to spend time with you, it's special. Kalvik's muscles tensed as Midnight began to purr, rubbing her sleek body against his leg. He stared down at her, completely unsure of how to react. His species had never encountered anything like this, a creature that wasn't trying to attack or flee, but instead seeking out. Contact. What does it want? Kalvik grunted, his claws flexing. Is this a challenge? Lane laughed softly. No challenge. She's just showing you she likes you. That purring sound? It means she's content. Kalvik blinked. The Braxton's entire cultural understanding of animals was being shattered in real time, and he wasn't entirely sure how to process it. Meanwhile, the other students were cautiously approaching the different enclosures, curious despite themselves. Silra hovered near an enclosure that held a fluffy, long-eared animal with large, expressive eyes. And this. That's a rabbit, Lane said. Another popular pet on Earth. Very gentle, but they can be quite skittish. You have to approach them slowly and carefully. Silra extended a tendril toward the rabbit, her silver skin shimmering as the tendril shifted colors. The rabbit sniffed the air cautiously but didn't retreat, allowing Silra to touch its fur. Her luminous eyes widened in surprise at the softness. This texture, it is pleasant. Lane smiled. Exactly. Rabbits are often kept for that reason. They're soft, comforting to pet, and they have a very calming effect on people. As the students slowly began to engage with the animals, their initial skepticism gave way to curiosity. Though their cultural understanding of animals was vastly different, the experience of interacting with these strange Terran creatures was unlike anything they had encountered before. Even Niska, who had remained distant from the beginning, found itself drawn toward an enclosure containing a bird with vibrant plumage. Lane smiled. That's a parrot. Highly intelligent, they can even mimic human speech. Niska's crystalline plates shifted, reflecting the light in shimmering waves. This creature can speak. Not in the way we do, Lane replied, but it can learn words and repeat them. They're incredibly clever, and they form strong bonds with their humans. Niska clicked thoughtfully, watching as the parrot tilted its head, observing the alien with bright, curious eyes. And for the first time, Niska felt something unexpected, a spark of understanding. As the moments ticked by, the alien students grew more engrossed in their interactions with the various creatures. Kalvik, who still appeared somewhat uncomfortable with Midnight circling his legs, tentatively reached down with a large clawed hand to pat the cat's sleek head. When Midnight responded by butting her head gently against his palm, Kalvik's eyes widened in surprise. She does not fear my touch, he muttered, half to himself. Braxton predators would never allow such vulnerability. That's the thing about cats, Lane said, grinning. They don't operate out of fear. It's trust. She's decided you're safe, so she's giving you the honor of her company. Kalvik blinked at the idea of trust coming from something so small and weak. Yet as Midnight purred contentedly, continuing to rub against his leg, a slow realization began to dawn. This wasn't a test of strength. It was something else entirely, a bond formed by choice, not dominance. His claws retracted, and his massive hand moved in a gentler, more deliberate stroke along the cat's back. Meanwhile, Silra's tendrils coiled and twisted with fascination as the rabbit she was petting cautiously leaned into her touch. The soft fur seemed to mesmerize her. This texture, it offers comfort, she said, her voice full of wonder. The rabbit responds with trust, much like the cat. How do humans form such a connection with their animals? It's a process, Lane explained. It takes time, patience, and care. We feed them, shelter them, and in return, they give us their companionship. It's an exchange, but not one based on survival or utility. It's emotional, a bond built on mutual trust. Kalvek, still patting Midnight with growing confidence, let out a deep, rumbling grunt. Braxton bonds are formed in the heat of battle, through shared survival. This, trust, it is different. Alien, yet not without its merits. You're starting to get it, Lane said, clapping his hands lightly. Humans aren't the only species that form bonds, but we're one of the few that do so with animals outside of our own kind. Pets remind us to be more than just warriors or survivors. They help us stay connected to a softer side, a part of us that doesn't always need to be strategizing or defending. Resk, who had been observing from the side, made his way toward one of the larger enclosures, where a large, fluffy dog was wagging its tail energetically. The Corlin's bulbous eyes narrowed as the dog barked once, then sat down expectantly, staring up at him with eager, intelligent eyes. This creature, Resk said cautiously, seems excitable. What purpose does it serve? Lane chuckled. That's Rusty. He's a dog, another one of Earth's most popular pets. Dogs are known for their loyalty. They form very strong bonds with their humans, and in ancient times they were used for hunting and guarding. Now, though, most dogs are just loving companions. Loyalty, Resk repeated, his tendrils twitching in thought. Loyalty without the threat of harm or the promise of reward. Exactly, Lane confirmed. Dogs are hardwired to be loyal to their pack, and once you become part of that pack, you're in for life. They're there for you no matter what, and that kind of bond can be pretty powerful. Resk regarded the dog with renewed interest. Slowly, he extended a tentative hand toward Rusty, who responded immediately by licking Resk's outstretched palm with an enthusiastic wag of his tail. Resk recoiled slightly, his eyes widening in shock at the unexpected affection. It is. Unafraid, Resk noted, his voice quieter now. It seeks connection, much like the others. Exactly, Lane said. Dogs don't hold back when it comes to affection. They'll stick by you through thick and thin. That loyalty and trust, it teaches us something about ourselves, too. Kalvek, who had been watching Resk's interaction with the dog, seemed to be slowly coming around to the idea. Loyalty without the need for battle. It is an interesting concept. Perhaps there is strength in such a bond, even if it is not forged in combat. Lane nodded. There's a different kind of strength in caring for something that depends on you. It teaches us patience, responsibility, and even humility. Sometimes the smallest creatures can teach the greatest lessons. Niska, who had remained somewhat aloof, approached the parrot's enclosure again. Its crystalline plates shimmered as it observed the bird's vibrant plumage. This creature possesses intelligence, you say? Can it truly mimic Terran speech? Lane grinned, stepping closer to the parrot's cage. Oh, absolutely. Here, watch this. He extended his finger toward the bird, who hopped onto it with a flutter of wings. Hey there, Polly. Can you say hello? The parrot cocked its head, eyeing the crystalline alien for a moment before chirping out, hello. Hello! Niska's plates vibrated in response, reflecting an array of colors. Fascinating. It mimics, yet does not understand. That's right, Lane said. It's not true language the way we understand it, but it shows a level of intelligence that allows them to form connections. Parrots bond with their humans, and though they don't speak in full sentences, they can convey meaning and emotions through their behavior and the words they've learned. The parrot, seemingly eager for more attention, flapped its wings and let out a string of mimicked phrases. Pretty bird. Polly want a cracker. Niska's plates clicked in rhythm as it processed the interaction. While it may lack full comprehension, there is an undeniable intelligence in its capacity for mimicry. The bond you speak of, though primitive, has merit. Lane smiled warmly. Exactly. Pets may not always understand us in the same way another person might, but the connection is real. They're not just companions, they're reminders that there's more to life than survival. There's joy, playfulness, and unconditional love. Kalvek, still petting Midnight, who had now settled into his lap, seemed to relax slightly. Perhaps these creatures offer a kind of strength we have overlooked. Not in muscle or defense, but in the ability to foster connection. This cat does not fear me, even though I am far stronger. It trusts that I will not harm it. That trust. It is curious. Silra's tendrils drifted toward the ceiling, an indication that she was deep in thought. Perhaps the bond between Terrans and their pets is not so different from the bonds we form with our own kind, yet it takes a different shape. It is based on care rather than mutual survival. Resk's tendrils twitched as Rusty rested his head against the Corlin's knee, looking up at him with large, trusting eyes. The loyalty of this dog, it is not dependent on force or fear. It is given freely. Such loyalty is rare. Lane nodded, his smile softening into something more thoughtful. And that's why we keep them close. Pets remind us of the importance of kindness, loyalty, and care, even when there's no immediate gain. In a way, they reflect the best parts of what we strive to be. As the lesson continued, the students grew more comfortable with the concept of pets. The initial skepticism had given way to cautious interest, and soon the room was filled with the soft sounds of alien beings engaging with the various animals, petting, observing, and even laughing. It was Silra who broke the silence first. "Professor Lane, if I may ask, do all humans keep pets? Is it common across your species?" Lane chuckled. "Not every human, no, but it's incredibly common. Some humans prefer dogs, others cats. Some keep birds, reptiles, even fish. It depends on the person and the connection they want to form. But the idea of having a companion animal is pretty universal." Niska clicked its plates again, still watching the parrot. "I believe this lesson has been more valuable than I anticipated. Though our species lacks the same emotional framework, I am beginning to understand the Terran fascination with these creatures. The bond is efficient in its own way." Kalvek, who had begun scratching midnight behind the ears, let out a thoughtful growl. "Perhaps there is strength in softness. Not all bonds need to be forged through blood and battle. This cat trusts that I will protect it, despite its weakness. Perhaps that trust is its own kind of power." Lane smiled, standing before the class with a sense of pride. "That's the beauty of it. These little creatures teach us a lot about ourselves, whether we realize it or not. And in return, we offer them safety and love. It's a partnership, one that's lasted for millennia on Earth, and I think you've all started to see why." The room was quiet for a long moment as the students considered his words. Even those who had been the most skeptical at the beginning of the lesson were now engaged in some form of interaction with the pets. Kalvek stroking Midnight's fur, Resk gently scratching behind Rusty's ears, and even Niska cautiously allowing the parrot to perch on its outstretched crystalline arm. Lane watched them all, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. It had been a strange lesson, but it was one of his favorites to teach. Seeing these hardened, pragmatic alien beings slowly soften in the presence of Earth's most beloved creatures was a reminder of the universal power of connection, no matter how unlikely it might seem.